Greetings, I'm Dr. Catherine Y. Brown, and as I continue my journey of hearing the voices of patients, caregivers, medical professionals, and the community who have been impacted in some way or work with pulmonary hypertension, it is with much excitement that I introduce you to my guest today, Mr. Clive Smith. Welcome, Clive. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing okay. It was my birthday yesterday, so I suppose I'm still on a bit of a high from that.
Happy birthday.
It's another day on.
So for our viewers, can you share where you're joining from and a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, a brief part about myself, because this won't really be about me, but about my late wife. But I'm an accountant by profession. I did have when I was at school, I had a great interest in the medical field, but I felt I wasn't bright enough to go down that route, so I ended up in accountancy. I did have a stint as a teenager in the British Red Cross, believe it or not. So there was something there, but I've never ever had a proper medical training or anything. My wife, Alero, who I met about 13 years ago, it was. She was my second wife. She was 53. She died sadly from it's IPAH, so idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension, as you probably well know, of course. In terms of my journey with her, I mean, you know, she was a wonderful woman, a religious woman. You know, she was a keen churchgoer. Tried to convert me to the church, didn't really properly succeed, I'm afraid. And she was the oldest of 4 siblings. She had 1 son from her first marriage. I have 3 adult children from my first marriage. And she was my soulmate, to be frank. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional already. I'm so sorry about that. But in terms of, I personally have had asthma for quite a period of time.
Yeah.
And it's peculiar that having a respiratory disease like that, which only on a few occasions I had a bad asthma attack.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it couldn't be strange that, whereas she never really had any problem with her breathing, that what happened was one day, I'm sorry, I haven't said my background. I currently live in Kent, in southeast England.
Mm-hmm.
My wife was born in London, spent her formative years in Nigeria. She has a Nigerian mother. Oh, sorry, she has a Jamaican mother, and her father, who sadly died in the last 10 years, he was from Nigeria. So she spent her growing up, teenage years in Nigeria, came back to the UK, and then moved to Houston with her first husband, which she was in Houston, Texas for about 14 years, I think. And then she came back to the UK with her son, and then we met. So, you know, that's how we met. We just, you know, if she hadn't come back. But what we did find, and that's what we're talking about, is that at the time when I worked in London and she worked in London, I would have walked past her workplace in Victoria Street, near Victoria.
Ah.
Where I worked past Buckingham Palace, not in Buckingham Palace, but past Buckingham Palace. I used to walk that way to work. But, you know, we obviously had paths might have actually crossed then. But getting back to her story with pulmonary hypertension, a larger, not like in America, it's quite large for over here, one of our shopping malls, Blue Water. She used to go there a lot. So all the main designer shops were there, and normal sort of clothing shops. She used to go there very often. But one day in May, it was May 2018, she rang me and said, I'm going to accident emergency, what we call A&E. Nothing's quite right. And I met her up at the hospital. And the initial thought that she might actually have lung cancer. And of course, that was obviously a huge shock, because she had problems walking upstairs sometimes, but it would come and go. And then we had a little dog, and we used to walk around the local park, and there was a sort of a gradual incline there.
Mhm.
And from time to time, she used to find it harder to get up that slope. Whereas I can get really breathless with my asthma.
Yes.
She was never really breathless, but she never had the energy, it felt. So going back to that day, so I hadn't really prepared what I was going to say, but going back to that day in May 2018. So I picked her up from the hospital, and there were sort of various tests as these things happen in the UK. You don't get an immediate response. But eventually a consultant referred Alero, my wife, to the Royal Free Hospital in London because he suspected that she had pulmonary hypertension. Now, I'd heard of hypertension.
Correct.
I've never heard of pulmonary hypertension. Of course, the two things, as I now know, are not the same. So we went up there. She got diagnosed, sadly, with that. But she wasn't too bad in 2018.
What were the tests that they did to diagnose her, Clive?
Do you know, I really don't know now, I'm afraid, Doctor. There were lots of tests.
Okay.
But having read up, since she died, having read up more about the condition, in the UK, what really astonishes me is that they test for, and this is UK obviously only that I know about, that they seem to test for pulmonary hypertension at the end of eliminating everything else.
Uh-huh.
And I find that really strange, but I have read also as well, and this is what I have read personally, obviously I'm not an expert in the field, that some of the other conditions it could be something else that's similar, so it's actually quite hard to detect. But my view is afterwards, why don't they check for that first? Because when we got the diagnosis, we looked up and we're looking up on, Google, looking up about the conditions, seeing the limiting life expectancy, we're both really in denial. I wish now, we turn the clock back, I wish I wasn't in denial. But what happened with Alero was that the Royal Free Hospital, which I felt her care there was near enough exemplary, they persuaded her to have this line put straight into her heart with this particular drug that supposedly would give her quite a lot of mobility back. So she had this line which she had to change, not the line, sorry, the drug had to be changed every 48 hours with a pump.
Mm-hmm.
So it's through what I would know as a Hickman line straight into her heart. And she didn't really, I mean, that happened in 2019. And it didn't really sort of it wasn't deteriorating. I mean, so much so that we managed to get a cruise, a 2-week cruise in the Mediterranean in September 2019. Mm-hmm. And she was fairly mobile. I mean, we went to Barcelona, we couldn't keep up with the tour guide, but she was very proud of Lero. There was 2 things she never wanted to have. One was to be in a wheelchair, mm-hmm, at any stage. And the other one was also, we have, in the UK, we have a disabled badge, but she could have applied for that, but she never wanted that. So she's very proud, but through her, and again, I'm not a religious person myself, but my views on religion changed. I know it's about this, but she believed that she would get better, mm-hmm, even though the prognosis wasn't that good, wasn't that favourable. In 2019, before we went on the cruise, the consultant at Royal Free Hospital shocked us because he said, you really need to consider a lung transplant. And because what he told us was that each year she had a 33% chance of having a cardiac arrest. Mm-hmm. And there were 3 times that I was aware of in the time leading up to that, where Alero was actually at home. It wasn't a fainting, but she collapsed.
Yes.
And that was really, really shocking for obvious reasons. And although initially she didn't want to be considered for a transplant, she was persuaded, to go on that list. Now, I don't think it's the time and the place here that she was referred to Royal Papworth in Cambridge, and she was transferred up there, we went into, please tell me if you don't want to go down this route, but you know, the final story, and I'm really hoping I don't get upset again. I'm trying to be sort of cold-hearted about this. Well, I'm not cold-hearted at all about it, but just trying to just say it how it is. That in July 2020, she went in for a liver biopsy, and it was meant to be a day visit, and I went up with her. And when she had her line put in, it was a really quite quick operation, and she was gone for hours. And apparently she had a lot of blood loss there. Now, I have found, and I have spoken to another, a lady who's sadly her youngest son died from the same thing, IPAH, same condition, I should say, that he had a liver test and the same thing went wrong with him as well. And he was taken off the transplant list, whereas Alero wasn't. And after a period of 3 weeks, she was transferred up to Royal Papworth, where she spent the last four months of her life effectively in hospital, waiting for it was actually a heart and lung transplant in the end, which never came. And you know, personally, I'm really quite furious about that. The treatment of her specifically, having looked through her medical notes, it's appalling actually. But in terms of the condition, I know that's why you're contacting me. So my personal gripe with the hospital, which is ongoing, is nothing to do with her condition as such.
But you know what, Clive, I think it is part of the reality of what caregivers go through. And for me, you go back through and play by play and you see things, and because it's so rare, so many people don't understand what we're going through as caregivers, but what they're going through with their lived experience. And you know, that's why I'm doing this work, because people don't understand the voices and that it's a life. I remember at the end with my mother, they kept putting a DNR, and I was like, take that off.
My wife had that as well.
Yeah, and it's like you can tell them to, you have to fight, and you're advocating in so many different ways, you know, nonstop, that you become like, where you're like a scribe writing everything that happens. So yeah, I'm sorry that that's your experience, but I'm sorry that it's my experience too, and so many other people's experiences. So I appreciate you for even sharing, because it is hard for us, and we lose our person and we try to compartmentalize this little piece of our heart that is on. And so what I'm learning, Clive, is that why is our story so similar? All of us that I'm interviewing, this is our story. And that's why we have to say something, so that people can understand that we shouldn't be left to feel this way.
I mean, the thing here is that, I mean, I have struggled. I'm an accountant. I'm not a rich accountant. But I've been down solicitor's routes with this, because my goal was, I can't bring an arrow back.
Yeah.
But the selection criteria, and of course, this is the UK, and I have read a lot, not recently, I've read a lot about transplantation rules in the US, and it does seem to be fundamentally different. There does seem to be a certain amount of, I can't prove this, I've actually got data from the UK, from the which I've gleaned from the British Heart Transplant Service, that they actually do, and it does go down the routes of ethnicity, that they hide behind the Freedom of Information Act in the UK, because there's only been, I think, and it may well have changed now, about 360 heart and lung transplants in the UK since the first one was successful in 1984, which is not a lot. And we were told originally she was going to have a lung transplant. Now, obviously, going to heart and lung, and again, and you're quite right, Doctor, that you say as you go through as the carer, as it were, that when I was sitting with the consultant, the transplantation consultant in Royal Papworth, Alera was a strong woman, and she didn't want me, and I'm quite a mouthy individual in the wrong, but she would not want me to attack them for fear of that she would be treated worse, because I'm going, but why is this? Why is that? Because Alera was AB blood group. Now, again, although I did do biology at school, A level over here, and I'd forgotten this, but AB I said to the consultant, I said, with the AB, you're not going, she's not going to get a transplant in, is she? Because there'll be very, very few, you know, the percentage of people, there's only 4% of the UK have got AB blood group. She would have it, forgetting that AB blood group can take organs from everybody else. So we were told that, and it gave Valero false hope all the time. It was false hope, false hope, false hope. Whereas in reality was that she had literally had no chance. I believe she had no chance of getting that transplant, and she could have had those last 4 months or maybe even longer at home with her family and friends.
Yeah.
And of course, in this time, it was lockdown in the UK. I was only, when she was in Papworth, I was only allowed to see her once a week for about 6 hours. And the whole thing's so distressing. I mean, not just for her, to think that she went through that, and she had literally had no chance with the data I've looked at of actually getting a transplant. Now, I don't really want to go down this route, but I'm going to say it. Again, you can edit out what you can use, obviously. I think you can use what you want. The point is that Valero was Black ethnicity. And I've looked into the percentage of lung and heart and lung of ethnicity in the UK. And for that reason, we were not told that I don't think there's ever been a person who's had a heart and lung transplant who is Black in the UK. Now, I still intend to do something with this, but that isn't actually my main drive. My main drive is the honesty or the dishonesty of the transplantation team at Royal Papworth. This is a world-renowned hospital. You know, it's not, you know, again, it's one of the 6 transplantation centres in the UK. That's all we have. I mean, we're a small country or set of countries. But I just believe that looking at the guidelines that they're supposed to follow, it seems that they don't follow them. They don't inform the relatives. One of the guidelines is inform the relatives of the reality of getting a transplant. And that was clearly very low, because I mentioned the liver biopsy she had. Apparently she was given a blood transfusion. Now, I wasn't aware of that. And in the reply to Papworth, because I did query her case, I put a complaint in, was that one of the main reasons that she didn't get a transplant was because her antibodies built up. Well, they didn't tell us that.
Yeah.
They did not tell us that. She was transferred with the view that she would go on the transplant list. And also in the UK, I found out there were different levels of transplant list. So when you're, I mean, I suffered greatly with anxiety.
Yeah.
Leading up, and maybe from a month and a half before she died in November 2020. And I wasn't thinking straight, because I had a daily, I tried to ring Valero we agreed on 4 times a day. I could see her once a week. And that is so stressful to do. And although it's not, unlike America, it's not a long way, but it's a couple of hours drive to get to Cambridge, where Papworth is, from where we lived in Kent. But again, it goes through London. I wasn't allowed up there during the weeks. It wasn't as if I was allowed to transfer up there. And it's very hard. After she died in November 2020, maybe going through December 2020 and January 2021, sorry, yes, 2021, I do apologise, that I started to speak to a few other people. I'm not a big person for social media, but I was contacting them through various Facebook groups that are actually dedicated in the UK to pulmonary hypertension. But people don't really want to talk about it, do they? They've lost, and I'm not happy to talk about it, but I am willing to, because it upsets me every time I do it. But if it helps something else, because the big thing for me was that we have a charity in the UK called PHA UK. But they're very, very small. You know, I haven't read on that. Apparently in the UK is 2 to 4 people per every million are diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension in the UK. I don't know if that's the same in the US, but it's so small that people don't know about it. So therefore, because it's a small charity, it won't generate the funds. And the only way that would happen, and I think it's really sad to generate the funds, because I do believe, and again, I'm not a medical man, but I do believe of reading up what actually happens to the body with the lungs and the heart. I do believe there's something somewhere that someone's going to come up with an idea to actually cure it.
Yeah.
Because it's not like cancer, is it? It's not like other things. It's one organ not working with another, really.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Like you said, to get people to even listen to the story or share their story
Yes.
has been so challenging. And when we started the nonprofit, which is the Roberta Baines Wheeler Pulmonary Hypertension Awareness Group, it was hard to get people like that. You couldn't get them to share their stories. And we say like how many people are diagnosed, I mean, who get diagnosed, but how many people that don't get diagnosed? Because sometimes it's a difficult process to get the proper diagnosis, because similar, you know, you're told it's lung cancer and other things first, and it winds up not being that. So you're right, we have to continue the work and continue to fight and advocate for this. And so our theme has just been awareness, empowerment, and hope. Together, we can make a difference, but we have to hear the stories and share the stories. But funding, no, you know, we're not at this point today a multi-million-dollar or even $1 million nonprofit, but we do the work because it's the right thing to do, and people need to meet, you know, and hear your story, because I think by hearing your story, they can understand that they're not alone. And many people are, to me, I feel, suffering in silence. Not everyone, but quite a few. And then we get misinformation, and how is the stories are so similar of what you're experiencing there and what others are experiencing here.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, because you feel like you're on your own.
You do.
Because what Alero found was that, as well with the condition, certainly in the early stages of diagnosis, in her case, you wouldn't know there was anything wrong.
That's right.
You know, before we went on their cruise, we took the riverboat up the Thames, up to see, you know, Tower Bridge and do the London thing. We stayed in Greenwich in near London, or part of London. And we were walking up the gangplank up to the riverboat, and this older woman sort of tutted behind her, because it was a gradual incline, because Alara didn't have a stick, she didn't have a wheelchair. From the back, you couldn't see anything that was wrong with her. She was getting fed up with it, and that's so upsetting, because, and what Alero said to me was that never again would she judge anybody else for moving slowly or not looking right or anything else. You do not know what is going on, because there isn't this, I've got pulmonary hypertension. But even if you did, people can go, well, they think it would be hypertension or something. Oh, okay, get some tablets or something.
Yeah. And in some instances,
like wrongly named, if you see what I mean.
Exactly, because some people are told, like, go lose weight. That's not going to solve it. And people look at you from the outside, like you said, like my mother was a nurse, and as she was sick, she started having those spells where she would pass out and all these other things, and you look completely normal. And a lot of her colleagues and other people did not understand she's really sick. She's not okay, she's unwell. And then kind of that lapse, like you're talking about, you get the diagnosis, you get the prognosis, but you also get a medical appointment that you have to wait some more time to get more care. And that is very challenging. Unless you're admitted, you're going to get a diagnosis, a prognosis, and a date. And we'll see you in a couple more months. But you know, and some people are told that they have like a year or less to live.
Well, that's it, because as of course you know, the later the diagnosis, the harder it is to deal with it.
Correct.
Prolong the life. And I think back now that, again, where we live in a place, we live close to a place called Maidstone in Kent. That there's some steps there going back to the department store there, and she used to always hate going up those steps. Now I believe, and that was years before, that she probably had the milder version of that, but she had a hysterectomy as well about a couple of years before she was diagnosed. And of course, it was probably lurking in the background, or probably more in the foreground than not, but because she had the hysterectomy, it wasn't picked up, because that was the what she had to be dealt with. You know, again, there they thought she had cancer, and it wasn't, and then eventually she had the operation. but also because it's idiopathic, isn't it? We don't know what the cause is. But if I had my time again, I would have treated it. It wasn't that we didn't treat it seriously. We were both really in denial.
Yeah.
We were in denial. And of course, on every day, you don't see that deterioration, and it's stepped as well. There's good days, bad days, and even when she was in hospital, we used to. She didn't like the hospital food. It used to come to her cold, so we used to order a Deliveroo. I mean, that was a trauma itself, trying to get it into the hospital, and get to actually eat something, because I was trying to encourage her to eat because I felt the hospital weren't even trying. And she had considerable weight loss, the loss of appetite, and of course that all is a down spiral. But Doctor, I did do a Just Giving page on behalf of the charity, which her pastor actually, which was really good of him, he actually suggested I did that, and I listed out there. It's a really tough read, because I want people to actually understand it. And there was, I've raised, including the donation of myself, £2,500 for the charity, who thanked me for it, how far that goes. But it's very hard. I'm not someone to ask for money to look into the research, but to actually honour her. But I put it warts and all. She had diarrhea. She was sick. She had swelling in her legs.
Yes.
She just felt awful all the time.
All the time.
And it's horrible. It is horrible, as you well know.
Yeah, it's
not a lot you can do. I mean, I couldn't force feed her, but I was trying to encourage her down the other end of the phone, and it was this thing of, it was this 4 times a day. I used to ring her at 8 o'clock in the morning. I used to ring her about 2:30. Then when I got home, maybe about 7 o'clock in the evening from work, and then 10:30 at night. So she knew the times of day I would call. But it was always that worry between one call and the next. She could be seemingly okay at 8 o'clock, and then at 2:30, she's really not well.
Yeah, and it's unpredictable. You just
absolutely. And this was with again, a very much respected hospital, was in Royal Papworth. I mean, I just felt there that she was just a guinea pig. It was peer pressure from the Royal Free that transferred her up there. And again, we're talking more about the condition, about her own care. But if I'd have known that her blood transfusion basically ruled her out of a transplant, I wouldn't have let her be transferred up there. I'd say come home, and she would have done as well.
Yeah,
she would have done as well.
I'm with you. I hope that there's a cure one day. I hope that the research will help, and then in the meantime that we can get better and compassionate care for the patients, and then also understanding for caregivers. So let me ask you this: what does today look like for you? Are you still advocating, or what does that look like for you?
I found it very hard, Doctor. I mean, I did have I'm determined to get back to it. Everyone says they're going to write a book, but I had some really very strange events happen, which I won't mention now, and I'm putting it in the book. But some very, very strange things happened. Some really coincidental things happened. And I don't feel I'm at the end of my story yet. My story. I still think there's some things to come. Some of my friends think I'm a crackpot. Some people think that, especially my adult children, think that that it was through sleep deprivation and the trauma of what actually happened, that my mind had gone. But I know what I've seen. I believe that some things that I prayed to God in the hospital. I've never done that before. And I think because I prayed to God that certain things happened. But I have a very, I'm into conspiracy theories, and I'm not a scientist, but I'm very scientific because I'm an accountant. I'm very, black is black, white is white. That figure agrees to that. That's okay. There is nowhere in between. There's no grey. I'm going grey, but I don't do grey, I always say. But I do believe that there are certain things. Alera never really pushed me to be religious, but she believed her God was going to help her through this, and to a certain extent that could have been to her detriment, actually. But what I'm doing today is that I'm not going to criticise the charity. I offered them my support in beginning of 2021, but they're a small charity, because what I want to do is make myself available to talk to people who've been freshly diagnosed, to say, look, you know, I'll give them my experience. I would water it down, unlike you. You know, I'm saying exactly how it is with you, because I think that's really important. There's no point hiding anything here. But with relatives is to push further, because the trouble is, especially with transplants, there's not enough organs to go around, is there? And people aren't suitable. People will not. There is a huge resistance. I mean, I'm not a social media person, but your colleague found me on Twitter.
Yes.
You know, and I will change my Twitter handle. I'm very political on there. We're not into politics, but it's politics and football, Tottenham Hotspur, soccer. That's it, really, for me. I'm very two-dimensional, not one-dimensional, two-dimensional. But I put that on there as a sort of honour to there. It's very hard to get people, you know, introduced. There is a remarkable, fairly young lady who sort of helped me in the early stages, contacted me, saw my details, and she's had pulmonary hypertension since 17, and I think she's now in her early 30s. I don't know her personally,
yeah.
But she was sort of a big advocate of trying to point out what it's like as someone who's got the condition. It seems to me she is a remarkable young lady, even though I've not met her. I mean, I'm 61, just turned 61. It's a bit, and she's married, so I'm, you know, you don't do that sort of. I'm very bad at sort of saying, let's meet up and talk about it. It sounds a bit, you know, it's very difficult, isn't it? Because you don't want to be taken the wrong way.
Exactly.
So I did offer that to the charity. I haven't gone back to them, because why haven't I gone back to them? Well, it is time, but I just think that they're more about doing their newsletter and trying to help people who've got the condition, rather than spend their money on, let's get some proper research done. You know, let's
research.
You know, again, you know, that's it. Of course, research costs a lot of money, doesn't it? And you don't know how big the pot's got to be for it.
Absolutely.
I mean, perhaps now, actually, having made this call, I will contact and said, look, I really do want to make myself available to people. And, you know, I would, the thing is, though, I'd be there for them. It wouldn't be about me. Like, feels like it's been around me. It's a bit like my grieving process, really, that I'm still grieving now.
Yeah, I would agree. What date did she pass in November?
The 9th.
The 9th, okay. My mother passed, she's November 5th.
Oh, really?
Yeah, November 5th.
Really?
So yeah, and I agree. I think that I don't think it will ever go away, but we try to get better. And so there's a place in healing for me that has been sharing the story and then hearing other stories, because all we could do was the best that we knew how to do in that moment, and just love our loved ones. That's all we can do. So let me ask you this kind of in closing. And first I want to say thank you for sharing her story and your story. And your love for each other just sounds beautiful. It sounds like just a love story.
Well, I mean, people say this. I mean, she was my best friend as well as my wife. Yeah.
And you know what, Clive, I can feel that. You know, like I said, when you talk about her, the love that you both share is a beautiful thing. And so again, for you to have just the strength to even share your story, I appreciate you. And I'm so thankful that you got to love each other and to love your best friend for the time that you had with her. So
yeah, I mean, I had 11 years. I had 11 years with her, and the last 2 years weren't the best, but I still had 11 years with her, which I'd rather have 11 years with her than none.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So for our viewers that are watching this and listening, what would be your closing, I guess, words of wisdom as we think about our mantra, you know, awareness, empowerment, and hope? What would be your closing words?
Well, I think if it's of anything, I think as soon as one gets diagnosed, you've got to go on what I call the front foot. You don't just sit back because it's going to happen. Some people are lucky, some people do carry on living. The life expectancy is there. It's in the figures, isn't it? Is that you've got to get the best medical care. And if the only route is transplantation, is get on that transplant list. And again, this is just for UK. There are different levels of transplant lists which are not made clear. Challenge the medical people. Challenge the medical people. Don't sit back. The nursing care at Arrowhead was fantastic. I couldn't do their job.
Yeah.
But it's the people who make the decisions to make them be clear, to be realistic, because you know, if it is a limited time that people have got left,
That's right.
then take every opportunity to make the most of it. Don't delay.
Don't
Go
delay.
on holiday.
I love it. Don't delay. Spend time with your loved one and ask questions, and don't be afraid to challenge the system. So you have given us some words of wisdom to think about. And so I thank you again for being here. And for those of you all who are watching this interview, I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Share the message. Help us to increase awareness of pulmonary hypertension. Again, I'm Dr. Catherine Y. Brown, and thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Clive. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Doctor. Well, nice to meet you.
Yes, thank you.